My private investigator told me that Steve was a creature of habit, so at 5:15 p.m. on Thursday, I joined the crowd at a fancy bar in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, where Steve often hung out. I knew he would be joining his friends in the next few minutes. I wasn't nervous about the confrontation that would ensue shortly after his arrival, or the new direction my life was taking, because I had come to terms with my new reality very quickly, in less than a week. I have to admit that a glass of Knob Creek bourbon helped me relax. I was looking at the bar as the lounge area filled up around me when I glanced at the long mirror behind the rows of liquor bottles and noticed Steve. He had joined his friends, and the waitress had already placed a mug of beer on the table in front of him. Steve is a big, handsome man. I think he's about 10 years younger than my 52. He's easily over 6 feet tall, fit and athletic looking. He has light hair, blue eyes, and a classic, chiseled appearance. I understood why my wife, Lori, was drawn to him during her frequent business trips to the corporate office in Charlotte. My private investigator was able to get the basic information. Steve had joined the company 2 years earlier. He was a director in the marketing department and held roughly the same position as Lori in the sales department. They worked together on many projects and often traveled together to visit clients. I didn't bother the private investigator with a thorough investigation because Steve and Lori had provided most of the evidence themselves. After finishing my drink, I ordered another one and paid the bill. Walking across the room, I stood next to their table and glanced at the 5 men and 2 women who made up Steve's group. "Hi, Steve. I'm Chris Harrington, Lori's husband. I hope we can find a private place to talk." At first, Steve looked confused. He had a smile on his face, but his eyes expressed deep concern. Chris, nice to meet you. What are you doing in Charlotte?" "I flew in to talk to you in private." "Well, I'm here with friends. Do you think we could meet another time?" I glanced around the room. It was filling up quickly, and then nodded toward an empty booth in the back. "All I need is 10 minutes. I'll take that booth." Stepping away from Steve's table, I saw him finish his beer and order another. When he joined me a few minutes later, he looked troubled. "I can't imagine why you came all the way to North Carolina to talk to me. It would have been much easier to call." "I wanted to meet the man who had a sexual relationship with my wife." My quick and accurate response took most of the wind out of Steve's sails before he could respond. It's not what you think." I laughed. "It's exactly what I think. I managed to access the cloud server where you and Lori hid the videos. Now I have copies of all 16 of them." I don't think Steve could have been more surprised. "You have copies of them?" Instead of answering, I asked, "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know. Exactly. The 4 of us were on a trip to Allied Corp. in Cleveland. I think it was a little over a year ago. Lori's battery died and I lent her my computer. I don't know how it happened, but she found a fetish site I often visit." "Well, Steve, that just shows how stupid I am. I thought affairs lasted 6 to 8 months. Steve bowed his head. "It wasn't physical for a while. Lori was intrigued, and we talked and emailed before." The rest was left unsaid. Neither of us spoke, gathering our thoughts. "Chris, she loves you. You know that, don't you?" I nodded in agreement. "I love her too. That's why the divorce is going to be so hard." Steve was almost shouting, "You can't be serious! You're going to divorce her because of this?" "I deserve better than a lying, cheating—" I groaned. "I want to call her a whore, but I don't know if what she's doing counts as whoring. But it's grounds for divorce." Surprisingly, there was silence at the table for a long time until Steve asked, "Chris, what are you going to do with the videos?" "Well, I don't want to ruin Lori's life." Suddenly, I was exhausted and wanted only one thing: to leave the bar. "Steve, I'm going to leave because I'm flying home early tomorrow morning." Lori flew out of here to Philadelphia this morning and will be back home tomorrow afternoon, and then we'll talk. I looked Steve in the eye. Don't say a word to Lori, you sick piece of shit. I'll find out if you do, and I'll send those videos to everyone you know. I swallowed the last half-inch of knob, slammed my glass on the table, and went back to my hotel. Chris. As newly minted empty nesters, Lori and I had made a commitment to take two-week vacations together each year. For our upcoming fall vacation, we planned to fly to Vancouver and looked forward to eating and drinking our way south along the Pacific coast to San Francisco, stopping in Seattle and Portland along the way. It was Friday, and I had just booked a car for our vacation and arranged for first-class flights to Vancouver and home from San Francisco. It was while booking the hotel rooms that I discovered the first hints of Lori's affair. Lori and I traveled together for work. We had a habit of using our accumulated airline miles to buy plane tickets, hotel points to book rooms, and car rental points to reserve a car during our vacations. Reward points were one of the few perks of business travel, and they offset our vacation expenses. On every previous vacation, we always had enough points to cover these expenses, but I was surprised when I calculated that on our upcoming vacation, we would have to pay for 3 or 4 nights at a Marriott hotel. It didn't make any sense. I had 120 nights of travel, and I assumed that Lori would take her usual 75 nights. Enough points to cover 12 nights at Marriott hotels while we drove along the Pacific coast. Since we both traveled frequently, Lori and I decided it would be wise to share our account information in case of an emergency. We gave each other access to our calendars, bank accounts, credit cards, and other personal information online because we loved and trusted each other. We had no secrets. When I opened Lori's calendar and quickly scanned her itinerary for the past year, I saw that she had been away for 72 nights. Then I logged into her Marriott Rewards account and discovered that she had stayed at Marriott hotels only 51 nights. My stomach knotted as I wondered where Lori had stayed the other 21 nights. By comparing her calendar with the data from her Marriott Rewards account, I was able to determine that she had not booked any hotel rooms during her visits to her corporate office in Charlotte. The knot in my stomach tightened, and I thought I was going to throw up. For the first time in nearly 28 years of marriage, I wondered if Lori was having an affair. I was a linear thinker and wasn't afraid to confront an unpleasant situation, but I wasn't ready to continue my investigation. Instead, I informed my personal assistant of my intentions and left the office. Anne, I need to go to the gym for an early workout. After changing in our company locker room, I ran 2 miles to the nearest gym, lifted weights for 45 minutes, and then jogged back to work. After a quick shower and change, I passed Anne on my way back to my office. Chris, you have a few calls to return. Anne, something personal came up. I need an hour or so to take care of it. Is that why you left for the gym so early? As I nodded affirmatively, she continued. Chris, is there anything I can do to help? As I shook my head, walked past her, and closed the door to my office, I suspected that Anne was surprised by the extent of my sadness. When I sat down at my desk, all the tension returned, and when the phone rang a few seconds later, I was furious. Anne, I just told you I needed an hour. I'm sorry. Jim wants to talk to you. He asked me to interrupt you. Jim and I had been friends and colleagues throughout my career. He was the president of the company and the son of its founder. I had followed him up the corporate ladder and became his right-hand man and vice president of sales and marketing. I sighed. Sorry I snapped at you, Anne. Put him through. After I switched, Jim asked, What happened? Why weren't you answering your calls? I need an hour, Jim. Can I come in at 11:30? That won't work. I'm calling an urgent meeting about the Watson situation and I need your input. I was furious. Very furious. And I felt like I was about to explode as I begged him. Jim, please give me until 11:30. I need to sort out a problem. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. Then Jim coldly confirmed his agreement. See you at 11:30. I continued my investigation with a huge knot in my stomach. Each of our companies used the same software to compile expense reports, so I opened Lori's account and reviewed all of her travel expense reports for 24 months. The vast majority of Lori's trips were east of the Mississippi. Approximately one-third of her business trips were to the company's headquarters in Charlotte, with the remainder to other cities. According to Lori's expense reports, the cost of staying at the Marriott in Charlotte had been charged to her American Express corporate card for all trips 8 months ago. At that time, hotel charges were being charged for all trips except the trip to Charlotte. Looking at the information a second time, I thought, this can't be. My world was falling apart. Then, just as quickly, a simple explanation came to me. I even laughed with relief and chided myself for thinking so badly of my best friend, my wife. Many companies were cutting corners. In an effort to control the cost of accommodation for employees visiting headquarters, some companies paid for hotel stays directly at discounted rates and saved the points to use for future employee travel. I thought, that must be what happened to Lori's Marriott points. I thought about it for a few minutes, then opened my contacts file on my computer. I was looking for the name of someone from Lori's finance team. I had 46 contact names of people I had met through Lori's work. Finally, I found the number for the CFO, Sam Jennings, dialed his number, and left a voice message. Sam, this is Chris Harrington, Lori's husband. We've met a couple of times at corporate events. I'm calling the finance departments of various companies to see if they're changing their policies to save a few dollars by paying for hotel accommodations directly. Our finance people are considering this change, but I'm against it because I want my people to benefit from the hotel points. I'd appreciate a call back. I left my work number and then slowly made my way to Jim's office for our meeting. Jim gave me a questioning look when the meeting began, but I just shrugged. Within 20 minutes, the sales department, marketing department, finance department, and operations department had agreed on how to resolve the week-long issue with the Watson brothers, one of our oldest customers. When the meeting ended, Jim said, "Stay behind, Chris." When the room was empty and the door was closed, Jim asked, "What the hell is going on?" I sighed, and Jim gave me a moment to collect my thoughts. My blood pressure is below heart attack level, but only just. I'm still working on some things. Business or personal? It has nothing to do with business. Is it because of the kids? By this point, I was already somewhat agitated, so I just shook my head and waited a few moments. It's about Lori. An hour ago, I was certain she was having an affair. Now I feel more than foolish because I think I've figured out the problem. I'm just waiting for a call to confirm it. Jim grinned and shook his head. You're an idiot! Lori loves you to death and would never cheat on you, so stop thinking about nonsense and get out of here. Anne's worried face broke into a smile when she saw me smiling as I walked past her desk. Welcome back to the human race, Chris. After checking for urgent emails, I pressed the play button to retrieve my voicemail. Sam Jennings answered my call. Hi, Chris, good to hear from you. We haven't seriously considered paying directly and keeping the bonus points until now. I've looked into it and we'll save about $5,000 a year. But on the other hand, I've heard it will cost us 10 times that in lost employee morale. I agree with you. It's a bad idea. Hope this helps. As Sam finished the phrase, hope this helps, the photo of Lori on my desk flew across the room and smashed into the wall. While I was putting my laptop in my briefcase, Anne stood in the doorway of my office, looking at the broken photo on the floor and then at me. Anne, I'm taking the rest of the day off. Only call me if it's an emergency. If Lori calls, tell her I'm in a meeting and can't be disturbed. Without waiting for a reply, I walked out the door. Lori. It had been a disappointing day at work. Since my Friday morning began when Chris left for the office at 6:30, I felt justified in closing my home office at 3:30 and heading to the gym an hour earlier than usual. I felt naughty and very excited, so I chose the stair climber for my cardio workout because it was right across from 3 guys from a fraternity who were running on the treadmills. I knew those guys were visually feasting on my 51-year-old ass in leggings as I climbed the moving stairs, and it gave me immense pleasure. Thinking about what 3 college jocks could do to me, I began to fantasize. There was no doubt that my sex life was exceptional. Chris and I were still having sex 3 or 4 times a week. I also thought about my upcoming trip to Charlotte. I had already finished all my preparations and knew it was going to be a very busy time. The meetings were scheduled to start just 2 hours after my arrival in Charlotte, and I would be working non-stop until I left for home at noon on Friday. My only salvation was my nights with Steve. I would spend most of the workday in meetings, including with him, and the entire night in his bed. I knew it would be a deliciously wicked few nights. I was happy that I finally didn't feel guilty about my nearly year-long affair with Steve. After all, what we did together was so dirty. I could never have brought my beloved husband into the debauchery I engaged in with Steve. It was my personal vice, satisfying a sick sexual need I didn't even know I had. I had a wonderful life. I was proud to be a wife, mother, friend, and respected professional. But when I was with Steve, I could freely explore a newly discovered, deep, primal need. It was a need that no one in my normal life could ever know about. I didn't know I had this twisted need, and I only discovered it by accident. The 4 of us were on a business trip in Cleveland. Steve had booked a room so we could work together, outside of work hours, to prepare for upcoming meetings. We finished our preparations, and Steve invited us out to dinner. Everyone was ready to eat and drink, but I realized I needed another 30 minutes to finish some work for other clients. My tablet battery died, so Steve let me use his laptop. I quickly finished my work, and then, since I wasn't particularly hungry, I opened Google on Steve's computer to check on the delivery of a few items to our home. I typed FE into the search bar, hoping that FedEx.com would appear on the screen. Instead, I was shocked to find a long list of links to femdom websites. I was naive and didn't really understand what femdom meant, so I clicked on the first link. The video was so disgusting, but I watched video after video of women dominating and humiliating men. I couldn't believe Steve was watching this. At first I was horrified, but after watching half a dozen videos, I was aroused with desire. I met up with our group to have a drink, but then I excused myself. "Excuse me, I'm going to order dinner to my room." I barely touched my dinner when a long list of femdom websites popped up on my personal tablet, and I started browsing through various videos. Chris. It was almost 7:30 when I walked into the house on Friday night, and Lori was upset. "Where the hell have you been?" I replied to my loving wife, "I'm sorry. I got caught up in a problem at work and lost track of time. I sent you half a dozen messages and left 3 voicemails. Why didn't you deign to answer me?" "I'm sorry again. I turned off my phone and forgot to turn it back on. I was just happy to get out the door and come home." By that time, Lori had calmed down a bit. "I already ate, but your dinner is probably overcooked. It won't taste very good." I shrugged. "I'll go get some Chinese food and be back in a few minutes." As I was leaving, Lori started to say something, but I didn't catch what she said. When I returned, I ate in my home office and finished some work that had come in during the day, but mostly I waited for Lori to go to bed. At 9:30, she stood in the doorway of my office. "Are you going to bed soon?" "Number, I need to figure this problem out. I don't know how long it will take." I knew Lori wanted to say something else, but she just sighed. "Good night." I waited an hour to make sure Lori was asleep, then went to her office and took her laptop. Before taking it to my office, I checked the notepad in the top center drawer of Lori's desk. Her company required her to change her passwords every month to access the VPN, email system, and many other programs she used for work. She couldn't use the same password for 12 months, so she wrote each new password down in a notebook so she wouldn't forget. It took me less than 30 minutes to find what I was looking for. All the letters were in a folder labeled Steve Miller. The letters that interested me most were mixed in with business correspondence. After reading several months of private letters, I was shocked by Steve and Lori's depravity and perversion. Every new detail was like a knife in my gut. One of the letters, dated 2 months earlier, contained a URL that Steve had created. Lori's letter said that all their videos were stored on this secret website and protected by a password. Fortunately, Steve provided the password. When I opened the site, I knew what I was going to see because their constant emails were full of grotesque details. But I was wrong. Seeing my wife as a co-performer in every video was a nightmare, but I had proof that she was a disgusting person. When I looked at the clock and saw that it was 15 minutes to midnight, I was amazed at how much my life had been ruined in the 15 hours I had spent trying to book a hotel room for our trip. Lori, what a miserable weekend. On Saturday, while I was running errands around town, Chris was doing his usual weekly yard work. We could easily have afforded to hire a lawnmower, but Chris prided himself on taking care of the yard himself. We usually ate dinner late, but Chris kept putting me off, finding new yard projects to work on. I was stunned when Lowe's delivered some items at the end of the day, and as soon as Lowe's left, Butler's nursery delivered 3 new apple trees. Chris, what's all this mean? We talked about planting more apple trees in the backyard. I also want to triple the amount of hops I grow and add 2 new varieties for my India Pale Ale, a type of beer. And when are you going to do all that work? Today, I'll dig the holes for the trees and plant them first thing in the morning. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll build the trellises for the hops, and while you're away next week, I'll plant the hops. I was furious. Are you planning on spending any time with your wife this weekend? I'll be gone most of next week. You didn't offer, so I assumed you wanted to save your energy for the trip. I was surprised by Chris's reaction, and for a moment I felt guilty. But knowing that my secret about Charlotte was safe, I replied, I'll book a table for dinner. Please be ready to leave at 6:30. An hour before we were scheduled to leave, I became concerned when Chris came into the house and complained of back pain. Chris, is there anything I can do? No, just cancel the reservation. We can have pizza instead. I wanted to please my husband, so I did as he asked. After ordering the pizza, I went to pick it up, along with one of his favorite beers, India Pale Ale from a local brewery. I couldn't believe what I found when I returned with the pizza and beer. Chris was in bed, fast asleep. Sunday wasn't any better. I was hoping for Chris's famous morning joy, but he got up early, an hour before I woke up, and was in the yard working on his projects before I even got out of bed. I complained all day, but he kept working. Talk about disappointment. That evening, he worked in the backyard until almost 7:30, came into the house, ate a tuna salad sandwich, and was snoring 45 minutes later. Phew. On Monday morning, I was upset again. When the alarm went off, I immediately rolled over to lie next to Chris, but was stunned again. The bed was empty. I jumped out of bed, threw on my robe, and went to look for Chris, but he was gone. He just replied to my message almost 20 minutes later. Chris, I'm at work. I wondered if Chris was mad at me, but I couldn't remember what I had done wrong. I also wondered about the lack of sex over the weekend. I couldn't remember a single time, ever, that we hadn't had sex at least twice over the weekend. I decided to launch Operation Sleep with Your Husband and sent him a message. Lori, can't wait for tonight. An hour later, with no response, I sent him another message. By midday, I was furious because I couldn't understand why he wasn't responding. Some of our best sex had happened after dirty texting during the workday. I tried again. I was stunned by his response. Sorry, I'm going to be working late today. Over the next half hour, I called him 3 times, but each time the call went to voicemail. As a last resort, I texted Chris again. Lori, I'm leaving tomorrow morning for a 4-day trip. I'll be home no later than 6. My emotions were in turmoil. I knew I would still be angry about how I had been treated over the past few days, so I doubted we would have much fun after Chris got home. I decided to take out all my frustration on Steve, so I emailed him some very specific instructions. I knew my words would drive him crazy and make our week together the best ever. I was approaching devil status because it was already 6:30, and Chris still hadn't called, texted, or responded to any of my requests. I thought, what the hell? After eating dinner alone, I finished packing for the week and carried my briefcase and suitcase to the car. I turned on the TV and got angrier and angrier with every sitcom until I finally decided to go to bed. The next morning, Chris would get a cold, emotionless response from me. Chris. When I got home, Lori was already asleep. I wasn't afraid of her anger. In fact, I couldn't wait to not only confront her, but to completely dominate and destroy her in the coming days. It had been a very long day at work. I arrived early and stayed late because I didn't want to fall behind on my work just because I had a 2-hour meeting with a newly hired divorce lawyer. My shark, Vanessa, gave me a long list of tasks to complete while Lori was away. We discussed hiring a private investigator, but decided that the videos I had copied with the explicit content were sufficient ammunition. I crawled into bed, suspiciously for the last time, with my whore of a wife and fell asleep almost immediately. Since I'm a light sleeper by nature, I woke up on Tuesday morning 90 minutes before our alarm was set to go off. I took a shower, got dressed, and headed to work. I was on edge during the drive to the office, but I smiled when I got the first message from Lori. I could feel the steam coming off my phone. Lori, I don't know why you treat me so badly, but it's unbearable. You didn't come home for dinner like I asked. You didn't wake me up when you got into bed, and you left without kissing me goodbye. You know I'll be gone for 4 days. We're going to have a long talk when I get back on Friday night. An hour later. Lori. At the very least, I expected to hear, I'm sorry. Have a good week. What's going on with you, Chris? In between work meetings, client calls, and emails, I was also doing most of the legwork for our divorce. I had a list of our joint bills so that on Thursday I could pay off and cancel our credit cards and other debts, and then we would split whatever was left. Since I owned the house before I met Lori, I would keep it. Aside from a small second mortgage, the house was entirely mine. I hired movers to help me sort through Lori's personal belongings so that on Thursday I could take everything to her parents' garage. The locks in the house were changed, my children were listed as beneficiaries on my insurance policies, and my will and other legal documents were updated to exclude Lori. I spent a pleasant Tuesday evening planting hops in my backyard garden. It would be another 2 years before the plants reached maturity and began to bear fruit. After a late dinner, I went to bed and fell asleep by 9:30. Waking up early on Wednesday morning, I turned on my phone and saw a series of messages from Lori from the previous evening. Lori. Today, for the first time ever since we've known each other, you didn't call me while I was away. Please call me. This can't go on. We need to talk. The second message came an hour after the first. Lori, I'm begging you. Please call me. And finally, Lori, don't shut me out. Please tell me what's going on. I love you. I love you. I thought to myself, if she wants to know, I think it's time to tell her. Me, Steve Miller is what's wrong. Lori, when I read Steve Miller is what's wrong, I was overcome with fear. But it quickly passed when I realized that Chris had no way of knowing the depth of my affair. Because of his strange behavior over the weekend, I decided to play it safe and booked a room at the Marriott while I was in Charlotte. Although I was on edge and wanted the release that only Steve could give me, it wasn't worth jeopardizing my marriage. My further adventures could wait until my next trip to our headquarters the following month. When I dialed Chris's number, I was pleasantly surprised when he answered. Good morning, Chris. I don't understand. What does Steve have to do with you treating me badly? Chris's voice sounded tired and perhaps angry when he replied, If you don't understand that your relationship with Steve is completely unacceptable, I don't know what to say to you. Unacceptable? Chris, Steve is my colleague. We talk to each other several times a day. I know you understand. Chris didn't continue, and I interjected. If you're talking about our dinners together, I'm going to get upset. I know you have business dinners with women all the time, but it's never bothered me. I've never cared about your dinners with Steve or anyone else. Then why did you tell me that Steve was the reason for your behavior? My behavior changed when I found out about your affair with Steve. My affair? Are you out of your mind? I've never had an affair with Steve or anyone else. Are you saying that you and Steve never had sex? For God's sake, that's exactly what I'm saying. I never cheated on you, honey. I heard Chris's sobs, which broke my already aching heart, and his plea. Swear to me, Laurie. Swear to me that you never had an affair with Steve. Of course I swear to you. I swear that I never, under any circumstances, had a sexual relationship with Steve Miller or anyone else. There was a long silence on the line. Chris, are we okay? It took him a few seconds to answer. Yes, Laurie, we're okay. I have to go because we have an early meeting. Let's talk tonight and put last week behind us. I love you, Chris. Have a good day. Chris ended the call with his usual, I love you too. I was sweating and my heart was pounding when I hung up. I couldn't understand why Chris would think I was having an affair. My only thought was that someone at work might think Steve and I were too close or had dinner together too often. Maybe they told Chris. Knowing that I had just dodged a bullet, I vowed to limit my after-work time with Steve. I would never stay the night at his place again and would limit myself to one dinner with him every other visit. Chris. Seconds after Laurie hung up on me, telling me lie after lie, I started opening the cloud website used to store their videos and found 3 of my favorite clips of their activities. Within 5 minutes of ending the call, the video clips were uploaded to Laurie's Facebook page, and her password was changed. I wondered how many of Laurie's 1,380 Facebook friends would see her in action. Laurie. I left my hotel room and ran into a colleague in the lobby. The conversation with Chris had thrown me off schedule. Mallory was my friend, and most people would describe her as prim and proper, so I was stunned when she asked, "What the hell is going on?" "What do you mean?" "Your Facebook page, those awful, disgusting videos with Steve." "Mallory, what are you talking about?" Mallory stared at me for a long time. "Come with me, Laurie. Right now." Mallory literally dragged me into a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, took out her laptop, and turned it on. She typed a few commands, and when I looked, I saw that she was on my Facebook page. Mallory played a video that I didn't recognize, and within the next few seconds, my world exploded. Chris. Less than 10 minutes after I posted those 3 videos on Laurie's Facebook page, my son, Matthew, was the first to call. I answered, "Hey, buddy." Matt replied uncertainly, Dad, something weird is going on with Mom's Facebook account. I've been trying to call her, but it just goes straight to voicemail. I interrupted him. "I know, Matt. I have Mom's passwords and I posted the videos." "Oh, damn, Dad, that's cruel. I hope Mom deletes the post pretty quickly." "That won't be easy to do." "What do you mean, Dad?" "After I posted the video, I changed your Mom's password. She won't be able to access her page." "You're going to divorce her, aren't you, Dad?" "Just recently, I gave her one last chance to tell me the truth, but she lied. So yes, I'm filing for divorce. Can I ask you for a couple of favors?" "Of course, Dad. I guess." "Call your sister. Tell her not to watch the video, but to tell her what's going on. And call your mom. She needs support." "I'll do it, Dad." A little later. "What a mess. I love you, Dad." Shortly before noon, I had an unexpected visitor at work. I met Joe, Laurie's father, in the reception area and showed him into my office. "Chris, this is a real mess." I laughed. "Those were Matt's words, almost verbatim." "Oh my God, Matt saw those videos?" Joe was almost in shock as he continued. "Not only did her mother and I see them, but her children did too." There was silence for a few seconds. I'm not very familiar with Facebook, but Laurie told her mother that she couldn't access her account, so she couldn't delete the videos. Apparently, her password had been changed. There was a pleading look in his eyes. Chris, I'd consider it a personal favor if you would remove the videos from Facebook. I had always liked Joe and considered both of my relatives friends, so I opened Lori's page and within moments deleted the 3 files from Facebook. When I was done, I looked at Joe. Can Lori stay with you when she gets back? I know we need to talk, but I'm still not quite myself, and I need some time. Joe nodded in agreement before I even finished. Of course. Actually, it's probably for the best. A few moments later, he asked, Do you have any thoughts for the longer term? Yes, Joe, I do, and I think you know me well enough to understand what I have to do. There were tears in Joe's eyes as he confessed. Yes, I would have divorced her too. How awful. Our meeting took place on Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after Lori returned. When we spoke on the phone once, she begged, Please, Chris, let's meet and talk. We'll talk, but first I need to be alone. Lori continued to beg me to talk, bombarding me with phone calls, emails, and text messages, and involving our children, families, and friends. Finally, in the middle of the second week, I sent her a message. Let's meet in the backyard at noon on Saturday to talk. She sent endless replies thanking me for meeting and assuring me that she still loved me and wanted to repair the damage done to our relationship. I read every message, but didn't send a single reply. Before Lori arrived on Saturday, I stopped by Bernie's Deli and bought a Cobb salad for her and a turkey salad for myself. I thought about getting 6 bottles of beer for myself and a bottle of wine for Lori, but decided alcohol wouldn't help the conversation. But a lime soda would be just fine. I set the table in the backyard and waited for Lori, and at noon the doorbell rang, but I didn't get up. A little while later, after the 3rd ring, I saw Lori coming around the corner of the garage. She saw me, walked over to me, and spoke her first words while standing, staring at me, with her hands on her hips. You could have at least greeted me at the front door. You could have at least not been a lying whore. Admittedly, my response was a cheap shot, but I felt it was justified and continued. We can keep throwing barbs at each other, or we can talk. I gestured toward the table setting with her salad. After Lori sat down, we sat in awkward silence, gathering our thoughts. Chris, I've been trying to think of something to say to make you forgive me, but I can't think of anything. I need your help. Believe it or not, Lori, I've been thinking the same thing. I've decided you have nothing to say. But Chris, think about our family. It will be destroyed. Don't put this on me, Lori. You should have thought about that before you started fooling around. I didn't ask for this, and I don't deserve this. I'm just cleaning up after you. I know it's a cliché, but it was never about love. It was just, I don't know what it was. I'm so ashamed. 8 months later, Lori and I got divorced. We still see each other sometimes when we get together with one of the kids. We're friends, and I suspect Lori still wants more. But it's not going to happen. Every time I feel a spark for Lori, I remember the video. Nope, there's no getting over it. When my phone rang at 4:10 on Thursday, I knew what the message would say, but I looked at it anyway. I saw that it was from my private investigator, Emerson Burke. Emerson Burke. She's been taken care of. My wife was Martha Harrington. In addition to being a wife, mother, sister, daughter, and friend, she was also a senior partner at Willington & Compton, a prestigious law firm in Hartford. Martha's responsibilities as a senior partner included managing the affairs of 7 junior partners. She held 2 mandatory meetings a week for the junior partners, on Monday at 10 in the morning and on Thursday after lunch at 4. Every meeting started right on time. Anyone who was late felt Martha's wrath throughout the entire meeting. The sheriff who delivered the divorce papers to Martha interrupted the meeting on Thursday at 4:02 and did as he was instructed. "Mrs. Harrington, your husband wants a divorce. You have been officially served." After 23 years of marriage, I knew my wife well. She was utterly humiliated after being served in front of her subordinates. Despite the anger that engulfed Martha, she did not rush home. Instead, she locked herself in her office and began to review every word of the divorce papers as only an experienced lawyer could. I knew that a first reading of the documents would not provide my wife with all the answers she sought. As the reason for the divorce, I cited the classic irreconcilable differences. Martha breathed a sigh of relief when she read that marital infidelity was not listed as the reason for the divorce. She suspected that I knew something about her long-term affair with Michael Kinsley, a married 29-year-old employee of the firm. As for property, we would split the proceeds from the sale of our 7,300-square-foot house and our summer home on the Connecticut River. Martha would keep her pension, and I would keep mine. Bank and checking accounts would be divided after all debts were paid. We each earned enough money, so there was no need for alimony. What confused her when she got to the end of the legal documents was that a very successful engineering firm, which had been in our family for 3 generations, was not listed as an asset. Martha knew my divorce lawyer by reputation and had recommended her to several friends who needed this kind of service. Over the years, she had said many times that my lawyer was a shark, so she was surprised that someone so respected in legal circles could be so careless as to not mention the business. I knew she would suspect something was wrong, but she would be at a loss as to what it was. Martha reread the documents in detail to make sure that Michael Kinsley, her sex buddy, was not mentioned in them. She then called an emergency meeting of her most trusted partners and associates. They all looked through the papers and together came up with an initial plan to deal with her cuckold husband. Me. What my life was like before. My name is Chris Harrington. I met Martha at the University of Connecticut. She was a sophomore in law school, and I was finishing my doctoral dissertation in mechanical engineering. We started dating a week after we met and quickly became a couple. On our third date, after a delicious dinner at a restaurant, as we were walking to the car, Martha suggested, "Chris, invite me to your apartment and I'll get naked for you." We had fun and kissed until the end of the weekend. Our sex life was fantastic. "Chris, invite me to your apartment and I'll take my clothes off for you." We had fun and kissed until the end of the weekend. Our sex life was fantastic. We both agreed that we would never include others in our sex life and would remain an exclusive couple. We officially confirmed our vows to each other when we pledged to love, honor, cherish, and remain faithful to each other at our wedding, which took place 2 weeks after we both received our degrees. Our wedding was quite large. It took place in Martha's hometown of Portland, Maine. The reception at the wedding venue was held under tents on a warm, clear summer night on the rocky coast of Maine. We spent our honeymoon in Aruba and returned without any tan lines on our bodies. Martha applied to several law firms in Hartford before she finished school, and 2 weeks after we returned, she was offered a job in Willington and Compton. Over the next 2 decades, we fell deeper in love, raised 2 wonderful children, and balanced our careers and family life. I took over the reins of our family business and bought my father's shares when he retired 12 years ago. Martha became a junior partner at her law firm 7 years after she started working there and a senior partner in her 16th year. Life was great until the shit hit the fan. A little over 3 years ago, I received an anonymous letter at the office. The envelope was addressed to me with the words, "Personal and confidential," scribbled across the bottom. Inside the envelope was a folded sheet of notebook paper with the words, "Your wife is sleeping with Michael Kinsley," and a photo of Martha and Michael in the doorway of some motel. I hired a good private investigator, and within 2 months, I had enough evidence of Martha's infidelity. After another month of thinking, planning, and pretending to be a loving friend and devoted husband to Martha, I assembled my team, The team included my detective, a divorce lawyer, my business lawyer, and my personal accountant. I laid out what I wanted to do in the situation and explained to the group that it could take several years before everything worked out the way I wanted. Their job was to confirm at every step that my actions were legal and could not be used against me in a divorce. What happened to my life after that? The second message from my private investigator arrived at 10 minutes past 6 that same day. Emerson Burke, Michael Kinsley has been served. 2 weeks earlier, Emerson had met with Rachel Kinsley. He shared with her the results of a 3-year investigation and a huge amount of evidence of an affair between my wife and her husband. The detective recommended my divorce lawyer, who was happy to take on her case. I realized that all the plans Martha's group in Willington and Compton had devised to fight my divorce petition had been rejected because Michael's wife had cited spousal infidelity as the reason for the divorce. Her divorce petition included a detective's report, photographs, and video footage. It was a very solid package of evidence. The garage door of our house rattled at 10 minutes past 8 in the evening. 4 hours had passed since Martha had been served, and I silently wondered if her military counsel would outmaneuver my 3 years of planning. I sat at the head of our 10-person dining table. The second chair was placed at the opposite end, and I had removed the other 8 chairs to the basement. I poured Martha a glass of her favorite red wine and placed it on the table in front of her. When I heard the door from the garage open and Martha call out to me, I took my first sip of slightly chilled bourbon. The click of women's heels on the floor told me that she had first looked into the master bedroom, then into my study, and finally into the living room before I saw her in the kitchen doorway. Martha looked at me intently, then surveyed the entire kitchen and walked over to the chair at the far end of the table. Sitting down, she reached for the glass, thanked me for the wine, and took a big sip. Several minutes passed before she spoke. I don't want a divorce. I know, but I don't want a whore for a wife. Chris, please, let's talk like adults. Yes, I had an affair, but I'm not a whore, I replied. I'd bet that in the years we've been married, you've told me 50 times that only a whore would cheat on me. Those are your words, Martha. I could see that Martha was ready to pounce on me, but she held back. Her face flushed, and she began to breathe heavily. I watched silently as she slowly calmed down. Why did you have to destroy Michael's family? He has 2 wonderful children who will now grow up without a father. I had to stifle a laugh, shake my head, and reply calmly, Did you see Rachel Kinsley? She was knocked out, but she got back up. Her children will soon have a new father, and I'm guessing he won't be as unfaithful a jerk as your plaything. I paused for a moment, then continued. Why should I give a damn about that piece of shit's family? He didn't give a damn about anything concerning my family. Except you. Martha clenched her jaw and hissed. I'm going to ask you nicely to speak to me like an adult. Your vulgar language isn't going to help. I broke into a smile that I knew unnerved her. Martha, I'm not trying to help the situation. If you don't like my language, you can get up and leave. I swear to God, I won't stop you. Martha didn't move, and I knew she wouldn't. How long have you known? Instead of answering her question, I looked at the papers I had laid out in front of me before Martha arrived. I picked up a copy of the anonymous letter that had been delivered to my office and pushed it across the table. Martha took out the short letter and the photograph. After looking at them, she looked at the front of the envelope and read the postmark. 3 years? You've known for 3 years and you haven't done anything? I smiled wryly. Believe me, I've done a lot, Martha. You had a 4-hour meeting at work today to prepare for this conversation. I've had 3 years to prepare. When I finished my last sentence, I saw a shadow of concern cross Martha's face, but I didn't want to delve into the subject just yet. For example, we haven't had sex since I found out about this. Except for a kiss on the cheek, we hardly ever have any intimate contact. It's been 3 years since we last hugged each other tenderly and you didn't even notice. I thought you lost interest in sex. This comment made me laugh from the bottom of my heart. I just lost interest in sex with you. Marta thought for a couple of seconds. You haven't had sex in 3 years? I smiled from ear to ear. I haven't had sex in 3 years. With you. I've had all the sex I wanted. Leaning back in her chair, Martha sat there staring at me in shock. Meanwhile, I continued. The difference between us is that I have proof. Photos and videos. You don't have the same proof against me. Chris, I love you and I always have. The time I spent with Michael meant nothing. It was just a way to relieve stress, especially after you stopped having sex with me. Don't start, Martha. Your 3-year weekly affair is your fault. Don't you dare blame me. It took her a full minute to calm down, and then she continued. No matter what, I love you, and I know you love me. You're wrong, Martha. For 3 years, you've been lying to me. You broke our wedding vows and cheated on me. You humiliated me in the worst possible way. It took some time for the love to fade, but I don't love you anymore. In fact, I don't even like you anymore. The tears that Martha had been holding back all this time poured from her eyes. She jumped to her feet and ran out of the room. I didn't follow her, knowing she would be back soon, and most likely back in attack mode. I was right. Before returning, Martha changed into jeans and a blouse. She sat down and filled her glass from the bottle of wine I had left on her side of the table. Chris, I think we really need to rethink everything. I have a great team at the office, and with an outside divorce lawyer, you're going to lose a lot. I know Sharon Brown, Sharon was my lawyer, is a good lawyer, but I've already found several glaring errors in the petition she prepared. If we can't come to some kind of decision about how we can move forward, I'll set my team on you. My smiles were clearly having an effect on Martha. I smiled broadly again. The difference between your team and my team is that your team didn't exist this morning. My team has been slowly and methodically executing my plan for the past 3 years. Your team will only start the war tomorrow, and my team's work is already done. I let that sink into Martha's brain before continuing. I'm taking you at your word that you love me. I don't know how that's even possible after 3 years of deception, but I'll take your I love you. I can practically guarantee that by the time we divorce, you'll hate me with every fiber of your being. The funny thing is, everything you'll hate me for has already happened. You just don't know it yet. You'll never turn our children against me, Martha shouted. Calm down. I would never try to turn the children against you. In fact, I haven't even talked to our children yet. I want to call them on the weekend. And their parents and all their brothers and sisters. I'm going to tell them that I filed for divorce because of your long affair. I'll tell the kids and my family that I want them to treat you with respect, and I hope they continue their relationship with you. But that's entirely up to them. If anyone doesn't believe the depth of your betrayal, I'll offer to share the detective's report. I suspect you won't want them to see it, so you might as well just admit to your infidelity. Martha hated to lose. She began to realize that with every verbal salvo I fired, she was falling further and further behind, but instead of backing down, she exploded. I'm going to take your fucking company away from you. Now began the first, material half of my plan to destroy Martha. She expected that the threat to my firm would be her ace in the hole, but instead I directed her attack against herself. My company? What kind of company is that? She looked at me as if I had grown 2 heads and sneered, Precision engineering, I'm taking it for myself. My smirk lasted for a while. In fact, she screamed before I could respond. What? What are you laughing at? I spoke in the most condescending voice I could muster. Honey, don't you remember? 2 years ago, we sold this company to the Swedes. What? That's illegal. That's illegal. The company is a family asset, and I didn't agree to sell it. I didn't say you agreed to sell it. Nevertheless, you gave me power of attorney for everything related to the company. In fact, the document was issued to me by your firm. I used the power of attorney to make the sale and invest the money in foreign accounts. Every year, you personally signed our family tax documents, which clearly state the sale and movement of money. Good luck finding that money 2 years later." Martha was stunned. She sat there, her mouth moving like a fish blowing bubbles. I got up, left the room, and went upstairs to the guest room. Locking the door, I stripped down to my underwear, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally cried. The next morning, at 3 o'clock, the alarm clock rang. I got out of bed, took a shower, and headed to the airport to fly to Florida. Preparing for bachelorhood, I bought an apartment on Clearwater Beach, across the bay from Tampa. On that fateful evening, I shook Martha. As I expected, it took Martha and her team of lawyers several weeks to review the legal documents and financial statements before they realized that approximately $34 million from the sale of the company was no longer under the jurisdiction of a U.S. bank and therefore would not be included in the divorce settlement. Yes, it was a real shock for her. Judging by family traditions throughout our married life, the religious spiritual part of my plan was supposed to work in 5 weeks, on the Friday after Thanksgiving. Black Friday. As a child, Martha was very close to Edith, her maternal grandmother. Edith always arranged weekly outings just for the two of them. Decades later, Martha took the initiative in their relationship. In recent years, Martha had been traveling to Portland, Maine, at least once a month to visit her grandmother and take her out of the nursing home for a short time. They would have lunch together and, as long as Edith's health permitted, go to the mall. A family tradition started by Edith and continued by Martha for the past 15 years was that a nearly 175-year-old family nativity scene, passed down to Martha, was always displayed in the house at Christmas. Every year, on the Friday after Thanksgiving, Martha would go to the local bank and take out 24 figurines from a very large safe which made up the Christmas scene. Each figurine was individually wrapped in a velvet box. My children and I would go outside and gather 2 12-foot Christmas trees, 3 meters, 66 centimeters. It took our family a whole day to decorate the house. The highlight of the decorations was the nativity scene, with a table covered in straw in the center placed between the 2 trees. 3 rows of flowers were placed in front of the table to protect the incredibly valuable figurines from the wandering hands of our guests. When everything was ready, Martha would stand in front of her favorite nativity scene, and tears would inevitably roll down her cheeks. During the holiday season, Martha cried every time she looked at this scene. She once confessed to me that it was her happy place and reminded her of all the joys in her life. The scene filled her with memories of the past. We left the decorations in place until it was time to return to work after the holiday season. On that day, the whole family took down and put away the decorations. Martha gently packed each figurine and placed the boxes on the kitchen table. The next day, on her way to work, she stopped by the bank and put the boxes back in the safe deposit box for safekeeping until they were needed again next year. Most of my plan to divorce Martha didn't require the past 3 years. All but one element was completed within the first year. For the last 3 years, I planned my business trips for the beginning of the new year. Martha knew that my flight usually didn't leave until around noon, so instead of going to the office, I started my day in my home office. For the first 2 years, Martha and I had breakfast together on the first workday after the Christmas holidays. Then I helped her carry the boxes of figurines to the car. She wished me all the best, kissed me on the cheek, and drove to the bank, and then to work. This year, finally, circumstances turned out the way I had been hoping for more than 2 years. As we were getting dressed, Martha asked me, "Chris, can you do me a favor?" I looked at her and replied, "Sure. I have a lot of work to do this morning. Would you have time to drop the figurines off at the bank before you head to the airport?" I thought for a second and smiled. "That'll be easy enough. I'll take care of it. As I had expected, Martha's message arrived shortly before noon on Friday, right after Thanksgiving. Martha, where the hell are my figurines, asshole? I laughed so hard that coffee shot out of my nose. At that moment, Kate, my 38-year-old divorced neighbor, walked out of my bedroom naked and saw the coffee spray. She laughed with me. When she found out what had happened, she asked a simple question. Do you really need to respond to that message before I leave? After she left, I checked my phone and found several more messages and missed calls from Martha, her family, and our children. Although I didn't want to talk to Martha, I decided it would be much easier to call her than to talk to everyone else. What the hell took you so long to call back? Martha hissed when she answered my call. I was entertaining one of our neighbors. Since we already had sex this morning, it took a while. You remember how it is with us, right, Martha? Martha paused to calm down and continued. I want my nativity scene, and I want it now, immediately. Of course, go to the bank and get it. Chris, I know you didn't take the figurines to the bank. The last time the safe was accessed was when I took the figurines out last Christmas. Before she could continue, I asked, why didn't you return them this year? As you remember, you agreed to take them to the bank for me. Please, Chris, please, give me back my treasures. I'm sorry, Martha, but you're mistaken. I remember putting the boxes in the trunk of your car before I left for work, just like I do almost every year. What are you trying to get out of me, Martha? She sniffed. Oh my God, why are you doing this to me? I know you're angry, but why are you being so awful to me? It's amazing that you refuse to take any responsibility for your fucking life. Goodbye, Martha. I ended the conversation and decided to call everyone who had called me that day. I called them with the same message. Martha is trying to cause problems for me as the court date approaches. I don't know if anyone believed me, but I was sure that no one had any proof that the figurines were in my possession. Our divorce was finalized 14 months after I filed. Martha fought me at every turn and put up roadblock after roadblock. She involved the police and insurance investigators in the disappearance of her nativity scene. My only comment on the matter was, as far as I remember, I put all 24 boxes of figurines in the trunk of Martha's car. I would have been surprised if any of them believed me, but they couldn't prove that I had taken Martha's family heirloom. Martha and I saw each other a few times at events our children attended. We were reserved with each other but tried to keep our distance. 14 years after our divorce, I learned that Martha had been battling an aggressive form of breast cancer. Martha's days were coming to an end, and our daughter called me and asked if I would like to visit her mother while there was still time. When I entered the hospice room the next day, Martha was asleep. I watched her for almost an hour. Several times I had to fight back tears as I wandered through the alleys of memory. I must have been deep in thought because I started when I heard her voice. You know, you were right. I looked at the smiling face of my one true love and smiled back. Of course. I was always right, but out of curiosity, what are you talking about? Her faint smile flickered as she spoke. You told me that my love for you would turn to hate by the end of our divorce. After all the terrible things I did to you and our family, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I hated you for a long time. Just like I did, Martha. Her smile returned and we laughed together. Chris, do you still hate me? I paused for a moment. Number hate takes too much energy. After a while, I didn't have the strength for it anymore. How about you? Martha began to nod in agreement before I had even finished my sentence. I agree. After a while, hatred isn't worth the effort. We talked for about 2 hours. I was finishing a very old story about when our children were little when I looked up and saw that Martha had fallen asleep. My first impulse was to leave, but I changed my mind when I realized that this was probably the last time I would see her alive. After sleeping for an hour, Martha woke up and we continued reminiscing. We were both laughing like fools when our son Brian entered the room, followed by his wife Sue and our 3 grandchildren. I could tell right away that Brian was happy that I had come to visit his mother. I didn't stay long because I wanted Brian and his family to have Martha's undivided attention. I said goodbye and kissed Martha tenderly on the lips. Then I turned to leave, but Martha called after me. "Chris, can I ask you a favor?" After I nodded briefly in agreement, Martha looked at Brian. "Give your father and me a minute." Brian and Sue gathered their children and left. When we were alone, Martha continued. "I would like Brian's family and Rose's family to take turns performing the Christmas scene. Do you think that would be possible? Could you help make it happen?" Black Friday 2018. While many families spent the Friday after Thanksgiving looking for bargains at the local mall, my entire family spent the day at my daughter's house. The Rose family, along with her brother Brian and his family, as well as Grandpa, me, spent the day decorating the house. Candles and wreaths were lit in every window, lights were strung on the bushes surrounding the front yard, and Christmas trinkets were scattered throughout every room on the first floor of the house. We all agreed that the nativity scene would be in Rose's family room. We decorated 2 large 12-foot trees outside and set up a table covered with straw between them. 3 rows of flowers served as a protective barrier in front of the table, and 24 of Martha's Christmas pictures were laid out on the table. Before leaving for the evening, I took one last look at the figurines. Brian and Rose joined me. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I remembered Martha many years ago, how she stood in front of the nativity scene, crying and saying that it was her happy place. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my wife came home from the grocery store. She saw the notebook on the table in front of me and the pen in my hand and asked, "What are you doing?" "I decided to take up your challenge." "I don't remember. Remember last week when we were reading those stories on that website? I commented on how bad some of them were and said that even I could write better. You said I couldn't. You said I didn't have a creative streak. I probably did say that, but my comment was based on what I know about your grades when we were in school. You always got B's and C's on your class assignments that required writing, and you got a C on the assignment you had to do for business research and report writing." "Well, I think I can do better now." "Never mind, come help me carry the groceries." I helped her carry the bags and put some things away, then sat back down at the table and started writing. While she was making dinner, she asked, "What's that about?" "I'm not going to tell you. I'll let you read it when I'm done, and you can critique it before I post it online." I didn't think it would be too difficult. Sure, nothing I did in college earned me great grades, but I didn't need them back then. I just did what I had to do to get by in those classes. I didn't want to be there at all, but my parents more or less forced me to go. My dad wouldn't let me work in the family business without a bachelor's degree in business management. I had worked there after school and during the summers since I was 13, and I wanted to work there when I finished high school, but my dad said no. "Only with a degree. It's necessary for you to be able to work full-time." So I accepted that. I got my degree and went to work for the family business. I looked down at my notebook, picked up a pen, and began. "My name is Josh Barnum. I'm an aircraft mechanic for a major airline and married to Melinda Barnum. Melinda, I call her Melly, is an office manager at an insurance company. Melly and I have been together for just over 11 years, 9 of them married. We met in our sophomore year of college, and for me it was love at first sight. For Melly? Maybe. It took me 3 months to get her to go out with me. We clicked. On our 7th date, we made love for the first time. After that, we became a steady couple and usually made love 2 or 3 times a week, at least until the summer. I had a summer job working for my Uncle Bill, who owned a landscaping company. I worked 10 to 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. As a result, I rarely got to see Melly during the week. After 3 weeks of only seeing each other on Sundays, Melly started dating other guys. When I complained about it, she told me to deal with it or lose my Sundays. This was a defining moment in our relationship. I've already said that when it came to Melly, it was love at first sight, so I gave in to avoid losing her completely. At the time, I didn't realize what a mistake that was. It showed her that she could get away with a lot with me and that I would let things stay the way they were. It was 3 weeks later, on a Friday, and I had only worked 6 hours before calling it quits due to severe thunderstorms. I called Melly to see if she would go on a date with me that evening, and she told me she already had a date. I hung up without saying another word. I called around to see if anyone was doing anything and found out that Mike Matson was having a party at his house. I called and found out that I was welcome, so I decided to go. Bad move on my part. I walked in just in time to see Melly hugging and then kissing Dick Moore. Then they went out onto an impromptu dance floor where Melly pressed herself against Moore, and they danced slowly. Moore held her ass with both hands and pressed her tightly against him. Melly wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled his face toward her, and gave him a long, hot kiss. When the song ended, they seemed reluctant to pull away from each other. But when they finally did, Melly saw me. She said something to Dick, then headed in my direction. I turned and left the party. Damn me if I was going to stand there while she kissed someone else. The weather was nice on Saturday, so I ended up working a 12-hour day. I learned not to waste time calling Melly on Saturday night to make a date for Sunday, because she would be with someone else. I usually called her on Sunday around 10 and made plans for the afternoon and evening. But that Sunday morning, I didn't call. It was one thing to know she was dating when I wasn't available, but it was quite another to know she was kissing her dates. It seemed like the heat I had noticed between her and her date was some kind of sign that they were probably sleeping together, too. This planted a bad thought in my head. According to what Melly had told me, she hadn't dated any guy more than 4 times. So the question I asked myself after what I saw at Matt's was, had Melly slept with all of her boyfriends? If that was the case, I could be in trouble, since we usually had sex on our Sunday dates, and I had heard and believed that when you have sex with someone, you have sex with everyone that person has had sex with. I thought that maybe getting tested for STDs would be a good idea. Thinking that since Melly hadn't heard from me on Sunday morning, she might call me, I got the hell out of the house and was gone all day. When I got home for dinner, my mom told me that Melly had called twice and wanted me to call her when I got home. I waited until I finished dinner to call her. She got right down to business. Why didn't you call me this morning? I just thought, considering how you were kissing that guy who replaced me. We already talked about this, Josh. I'm not going to stay home just because you can't come. I know, and I was okay with that when I thought it was just platonic. But what I saw was way, way beyond platonic. I thought we had something special, Melissa, but I'm not so sure anymore. Don't say that, Josh. We really do have something special. We need to talk, baby. I don't care how late you have to work tomorrow, but when you're free, come over. Will you do that? I think I can. You promise? Okay, I'll be there as soon as I'm free. Monday was a 12-hour workday, so I didn't get to Melissa's house until around 9. Her mom opened the door and told me Melissa was waiting for me in the backyard. Melly was talking on the phone with her back to the door when I stepped outside, and what I overheard before she hung up didn't bode well for our relationship. What I heard was, I liked what we did on Friday. I can't wait to see you on Tuesday. I have to go. He'll be here soon. Bye. I went back into the house and then opened the door to the patio with a loud bang, and she turned around and saw me coming out of the house. I didn't let on that I had overheard anything, just walked over to the table and sat down. I just looked at her and waited. She finally realized that I wasn't going to start the conversation, so she said, "What's wrong, Josh? You agreed to let me go on a date when you couldn't make it." Yeah, but I thought these dates were supposed to be like going to the movies and maybe getting a milkshake at Harry's. Or maybe to a party like Matt's where you dance and hang out with our friends. Simple things. You're acting like you're still my girlfriend. That's not what I saw at Matt's. The way you kissed that guy and let him run his hands all over your body without even trying to stop him pretty much told me that if he's not sleeping with you already, he will soon. Not exactly how I expected my girlfriend to behave in front of my friends. Those are disgusting things to say to me. It is what it is. Maybe you should just leave. That's probably best. After what I saw and not knowing how you feel about all your dates, I think it would be a good idea to get tested. I stood up and left her there with a shocked look on her face. I made it to my car before she caught up with me. You don't really think that about me, do you? What I saw on Friday night was pretty rough, Melly. I don't want to take any chances. I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing there watching me. I did get tested, clean, but I never called Melly to tell her. We avoided each other for a little over a week. And then on Thursday, while I was eating lunch in the student cafeteria, Melly came over to my table, sat down, and said, "You didn't call me on Sunday." There was no need. That's not fair, Josh. Why do you expect me to sit at home 6 days a week because of your job? Maybe because I see it as an education. What the hell does that mean? Maybe it's to prepare you for what you might have to do after you get married, and your husband has a job that keeps him working late. That's just silly. Being married isn't the same as going to school. Maybe that's how you see it, but I don't. You knew all along that I was going to ask you to marry me after you graduated, and you made me believe you would say yes. You know that I'm majoring in aviation maintenance management, and when I graduate, I'll have my airplane and power plant licenses. My goal is to work for an airline and move up the career ladder. There's a damn good chance that if I do get a job with an airline as a rookie, I'll have the worst shifts and the worst weekends. If you can't handle my work schedule now, how are you going to handle my shift from 3 to 11 with Tuesdays and Wednesdays off? That's different. I'll be working too, and we'll do whatever we have to do to make it work for both of us. That's in the future if we have one. Right now, we need to survive as a couple, and I'm not sure we can, given what I now know about your dating life. We agreed to talk that evening after I finished work, and in the end, she gave in and said she would only meet on Fridays and Saturdays and would always make sure that our dates took place around my friends. That way, I could always ask someone if she was doing anything that wouldn't pass the boyfriend test. It helped that landscaping was a seasonal job that ended in late fall. Until the end of our course and throughout graduation, I kept a close eye on her, and she only slipped up 3 times, and I pretended not to notice. Why? Blame it on love. When we finished school, Melly moved in with me, and we lived together while our parents planned the wedding. It was a new experience for both of us, being able to make love every day and not rush home. There were nights when I wasn't sure I'd be able to get out of bed in the morning. It seemed like all Melly wanted, and me too, oh yes, me too, was to make love all the time. But of course we couldn't. I really got along well with the airline, and as always I had the worst shift, from 4 in the morning until midnight, with Wednesdays and Thursdays off. Melly had a degree in accounting and got a job at an accounting firm where she worked from 8 to 5, with Saturdays and Sundays off. During tax season, from about the end of January to the 1st of May, she usually worked 10 to 12 hours a day, and sometimes she had to work on Saturdays. We got married 5 months after we graduated, and our wedding gift from both sets of parents was the down payment on a 4-bedroom ranch in one of the best neighborhoods in town. Neither of us wanted to have children until we were established in our careers, so Melly used one of the bedrooms as a home office. There was a fairly large patio at the back of the house, and one of our first purchases after moving in was a hot tub, which was installed on one side of the patio. It didn't take long before it was filled. A month after the tub was installed, we had a housewarming party, and after everyone tried the tub, it seemed like we had a party every weekend. Not that I minded the company. I had to leave by 2:45 to get to work on time. As we got to know our neighbors, we started getting invited to barbecues and picnics, and once that started, we had to host a couple of our own, of course. We became really good friends with the neighbors on both sides of us and with those who live across the street. The first 2 years went great, and we adjusted to our different schedules. And then everything changed. I didn't find out about this until much later, but it was pretty much what I had been talking about when I spoke to Melinda back in college. I worked on Fridays and Saturdays, and Melinda was tired of sitting at home on the best date nights. At first, it was walks with the girls after work on Fridays, evenings she never told me about. After a couple of months, she decided that since she got away with me not finding out about her outings with the girls, she could get away with going out on Saturdays. She just needed to be home in bed by the time I got home. She started going on dates with guys she worked with and guys she met at parties. I don't know when this nonsense started, so I had no idea how long it had been going on. But I found out from a neighbor who lived across the street. He was out drinking with a client on Friday night after dinner and saw Melinda dancing provocatively with some guy and acting like a princess. On Saturday morning, when Melinda went out shopping, he came over and told me what he had seen. It upset me, but it didn't surprise me. He told me that his brother was a police officer who moonlighted as a private investigator on his weekends, and his brother's weekends were Friday and Saturday. His brother's rates were 25% of what a full-time private investigator would charge, so I asked him to have his brother contact me. All it cost me was for him to follow Melinda from Friday when she left work until she went home, and on Saturday from the moment I left work until she went home, which cost $600, and it was worth every penny. On Friday, when Melinda got off work, she went straight to the bar, and before she could sit down on a bar stool, a guy bought her a drink and danced with her. They left the bar at 8 and checked into motel number 6. And yes, they left the lights on, and stayed in room 107 until 11, and then she went home. On Saturday, she didn't even leave the house. At 4, Philby, her boss, arrived, and although Spencer, the police officer, was unable to film what was happening in the house, he took some pretty good shots of Melinda entertaining her boss. On my first day off, I took everything I had to a divorce lawyer, and after looking at what I had, he suggested I contact her boss for a separation of assets and her company if there was anything in their policy and procedure manual about relationships between managers and those they supervise. Her boss owns the company, and when I told him that, I could almost see dollar signs in his eyes. I told him to go ahead and get on it. He told me to give him a week or so and he would have the paperwork ready for me to sign. I left his office, hoping I could act like the ignorant fool I was, until I got Spencer's report. I guess I must have succeeded, because Melinda didn't seem any different to me. The lawyer called me a week later and said he had the papers ready for me to sign. When I went to his office, he smiled and said he had very good news for me. Apparently, her boss had bragged to everyone in the office that he had slept with Melinda. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that overheard conversations are just hearsay, right? Basically, it's a he said, she said situation. Maybe if it hadn't been recorded, the guy who gave me the tape hates Philby and is always looking for a way to screw him over. Isn't there some law that says both parties have to be aware of the recording? In some states, yes, but ours isn't one of them. All right then, go ahead and do what you think is best. I finished the story, reread it, and decided it was fine. It was almost dinner time. I called my wife from the kitchen and handed her the story, asking her to read it and comment. She took the story from me and began to read it. About halfway through, she began to frown, and finally gasped loudly, looked at me, and fainted. I stood up, grabbed a glass of water, and splashed it on her face. She muttered something as I helped her up. Just then, the doorbell rang, and I told her it was probably for her. She looked embarrassed as I walked her to the door. There stood a young blonde girl. The blonde stopped chewing her gum long enough to ask, "Mrs. Melinda Barnum?" Melinda said yes, and the blonde handed her an envelope saying, "You're all set. Have a nice evening." Melinda didn't hear the last part. She fainted again when she heard that she had been served. This time I didn't bother with a glass of water. I just grabbed her leg and dragged her into the house to close the door, then went to the kitchen and got myself a beer.